What's up everyone, my name's Robbie, this is Robbie in Manila, and today we have a killer video. So if you're not sure who Cathie Wood is, she is the founder and CIO of Ark Invest, and she is absolutely killing the stock market. So people are always talking about these hedge fund managers like the Carl Icahns of the world or the Bill Ackmans of the world and how much money they make. But I don't hear a lot of people talking about the Cathie Woods of the world. And so Cathie Wood's company is not structured like Bill Ackman or Carl Icahn. It's not a hedge fund. Ark Invest actually has different ETFs that you can buy and trade on the market. So it's not a closed fund where she pools money and then invests only for those people. She actually has an ETF that she manages the underlying funds. And so the question is, can a Cathie Wood, who has a ETF type structure, compete with a Carl Icahn or a Bill Ackman in terms of how much money she makes? So that is what we're going to talk about in this video. Now keep watching. I think this is going to be a really interesting one. We're going to go over a lot of interesting things about Cathie Wood, compare her to if she actually had a hedge fund structure instead of an ETF structure. So let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay everyone, let's go ahead and get started. But first, after going through this, I realized compared to Cathie Wood, I'm totally poor. I'm broke. I have no money. It makes me feel bad. But, you know what would make me feel good is if you hit that like button. That would cheer me up. So cheer me up. Hit the like button. Thanks. Okay, to figure out how much Cathie Wood makes and potentially her net worth, we're going to figure out how much the Ark Invest ETFs make in revenue first. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just take one ETF that Ark has. It's their biggest one, their flagship ETF. It's ARKK, that's the ticker symbol, and it's the Ark Innovation ETF. So if we take a look here at the Ark Innovation ETF, this is the revenue and assets under management. And so AUM right here, and this is by the year, so January of 2016. Now, the deal is with this, if you take a look at any one day period within the year, you'll see over time, this fund has gone from 6.7 million to 15 million to 400 million, and it keeps going up. So every year as time goes on, they make more and more money. So we're looking at just a snapshot of revenue just on a date, and I'm annualizing it. So the real way to do this would be to take a whole year, average out the amount of assets under management for the whole year. But I'm not doing that here because they're growing so much. I just don't know exactly how much that would be, but we're gonna take a guess later. But basically, this is the revenue that they could have made if they had 6.7 million for the whole year of 2016. So they charge 0.75% as their fee, and they would have only made $50,000 to have this ETF. So they would be making like no money when they started off if they only had $6.7 million. And so this is the risk these people take when they go and they start a fund. And you can't go ahead and say like later on when Cathie Wood has billions of dollars that, oh, she's so lucky she doesn't do anything and she makes all this money. Well, you know, at the start, I'm sure she didn't make much money. She had to really build this thing out. She had to improve her performance. She had to do a lot of things until people caught on and then started putting money into the fund. The fund also grew because it made more and more money, of course, because it's been highly successful in its rates of return. So, you know, it's been a great time for Cathie. Let's just say that. So, if you look from 2016 at $6.7 million till January of 2020, when there's $2 billion in this ETF. And now, here's the crazy thing. Well, let me tell you the crazy thing in 1 second. Let's add up all the revenue so far. So if you just took all this revenue, this company, Ark Invest, would have made $27 million in revenue off of just this one ETF, ARKK. So that's a great amount of money. That's a lot of money, right? So, but take a look at this. This is crazy. This is crazy. So let's go to the next thing here and take a look at this. This is basically when I'm in December of 2020 and how much money they had in their ETF in December 2020. 15 billion B, that's with a B, $15 billion are now in this one ETF. It's just gone nuts. People are putting so much money into this. It's also growing at a crazy amount. So the compounding is amazing. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the deal is, at the start of the year, there was $2 billion in this fund, and now there's $15 billion. It's crazy. So just today, if they had just made 0.75% on this fund, they would have made $112 million. Just this year, if this stayed at $15 billion for a whole year, they would make $112 billion in revenue on this fund. Crazy, right? So, look how much money this fund has grown. The assets under management have grown recently. It's gone parabolic. So, Cathie Wood is making so much more money than she did last year, the year before, and the year before. I'm sure that she's very happy right now. So, 15 billion right now, as you can see. Just back in the start of 2020, it was 2 billion. So it has been a crazy run for her right now. Now, let's take a look here, and we can see the potential 2021 ARK revenue and assets under management for most of the funds. I don't have every single fund for her, every single ETF, because some of them you have to actually request information to get it, so I don't know the answers to those. I get all the public stuff that was on the website. So I have these different funds. These are all the ticker symbols. And then if we add all of these up, and so what we're doing is we're saying, like Ark Invest, ARKK, the one we just looked at, if it had 15 billion in assets under management for all of next year, all of 2021, it didn't go up, it didn't go down, right? So it just stayed at 15 billion. They would charge 0.75%, and they would generate 112 million in revenue off of this one fund. So that's what we're doing here. So if in 2021, all of these different funds that they have, ARKQ, ARKG, ARKW, all of these funds, you add them all up, the revenue that they would all generate is $158 million. That's a ton of money, right? That's a ton of money. So next, if we see how much might Cathie Wood make from this. So if we take a look in 2020 revenue, like we said before, 158 million. Now, of course, there's expenses. So these companies have, I think Cathie Wood's Ark Invest is located in New York City. Rent is probably very high. They have to pay their analysts. I'm sure they pay them well. You know, they're not scripting on analysts there because they want some great analysts, of course. So they definitely have a lot of expenses that they need to pay. And so the thing is, though, I don't think because of the industry that they're in that they have very high expenses. They have some, but it's not very high. They don't have cost of goods sold. They're not manufacturing products. There's all sorts of different costs that they don't need to incur because they're just an investment company, and their investment companies have nice margins. So what I did was I took a look at a similar investment company, not 100% similar, but kind of similar. AllianceBernstein is one that I looked at. They are a fund manager, and they had net margins of about 90%. So I said, okay, maybe Cathie Wood's Ark Invest has similar margins, potentially. If you don't think this is correct, okay, even if it's a 50% margin, they still made a ton of money. So at a 90% margin, the net profit is 142 million. So that's how much they're profiting off of, let's say, the 2021 revenue if they stay right where they are today and they have the same amount of assets under management for the whole year next year. That's a ton of money. And now, how much money does Cathie Wood actually make from that? Well, Cathie Wood owns between 50 and 75% of the fund. I looked at a few things, and that was basically the answer was it's not disclosed, maybe. I'm not sure why. But between 50 and 75% is her ownership in Ark Invest. So she would make, or her net worth at least, or potentially the income that she makes off of this, would be $71 million a year, up to $100 million a year. So Cathie Wood is not poor. Okay, of course, Cathie Wood ain't poor. She makes a lot of money. But the thing is she walking away from money? So she's not making as much money as a Bill Ackman or a Carl Icahn. So the question is, can someone who owns an ETF that has only a 0.75% fee, which is not that high in terms of hedge funds, can she compete with those guys? So what we're doing is we're going to say, what if Ark was a hedge fund? How much money would Ark make? So if Ark was a hedge fund, the current structure, of course, we just went over this, but what I'm doing here is I'm saying if in 2020, we just took the average assets under management for the whole year. So remember, it started at 2 billion for the year and it ended at about 15 billion, which is where I'm recording this today. So I'm going to assume that over the year, the average assets under management were 7 billion. And so 7 billion assets under management, how much would she have made if 0.75% were the fee? So the revenue from that would have been 52 million. So this is what I'm saying. 52 million in revenue from 7 billion in assets under management just for ARKK, just for that one fund. Okay? Next, if it was a hedge fund. So if it was a hedge fund instead of an ETF, hedge funds often charge something called 2 and 20. So a 2% fee, and then on top of that, they take 20% of all of the gains that they incur. So basically, if this was a 2 and 20 type fund in 2020 and it had 7 billion in assets under management, it would make, in the 2% fee, it would make 140 million. So already it's making almost 3 times more than Ark, right? The regular Ark, if it was an ETF, which it is, right? So if it was a hedge fund, just that 2% fee would give it a lot more revenue. Okay, the next part I kind of was really conservative with. So what I said was, let's say that they had 2 billion that they made a 20% return on instead of the 7 billion. Meaning maybe a lot of money came at the end of the year and they really didn't have the gains on the full amount of money, and they only had gains on on the equivalent of 2 billion of assets under management. Not to make it complicated, but I'm just trying to be conservative. So the deal is, if they had 2 billion and they made 20%, their revenue would have been $348 million. So if they were a hedge fund, they'd be making a little bit more money. So 348 for the 20% fee, the 2% fee, 140 million, and then the total revenue would have been 488 million if it was a hedge fund. So, moving on. Okay, so next we're looking at Cathie Wood's total income if this was a hedge fund instead of what it is now, which is an ETF, and it was charging all those fees as a hedge fund. So essentially, the 2020 revenue would be $488 million. The net margin, again, similar net margin. Net profit, $439 million. Cathie Wood's ownership, again, is 50 to 75%. She would have made $219 to $329 million in 2020 if she had this structured as a hedge fund. Now, moving on, we can just take a look and see the comparison here and how much more money that she could have potentially had if she had this structured as a hedge fund. So the current structure here, she made about 23 million to 35 million just from this one Ark ETF, by the way, ARKK, remember that. Where she could have made, if ARKK was instead a hedge fund, she could have made 219 to 329 million. So is she walking away from money? I mean, you know, you can't, it's probably hindsight type thing for her. If she had structured it as a hedge fund, maybe today she'd have a ton more money, but maybe she wouldn't have been able to get the funds that there are now in this because it's easier to get to, it's liquid, you can trade it on a stock exchange. So, you know, it's pros and cons. I'm not saying that she should have this structured as a hedge fund. I'm just saying, think of how much these hedge fund managers make. And they don't make, a lot of them, don't make returns anywhere near what Cathie Wood's been doing for the past few years. All right, so we figured out how much Cathie Wood makes potentially annually through Ark Invest as the ETF. We've figured out how much it could have potentially made if it was a hedge fund. The next question is, what is her net worth? So let's make some projections. Okay, so to figure out Cathie Wood's potential net worth, first we have to figure out what Ark Invest might be worth. So what we're gonna do, just like you would do with a stock, is you're gonna say, okay, what is the net income of Ark Invest, which I think have a conservative number here of 142 million. So I think that's conservative because that's just ARKK, the ticker symbol. It's not all of the funds. So, and you know, I think that's fine. So we're gonna say that that's the income. And then if we throw on some multiples, we can see a range. So a 5x multiple would make Ark Invest worth $711 million. So maybe someone came in and said, I want to make you an offer to pay and buy this whole company. I'm willing to pay $711 million. Maybe if they paid a 10 times multiple, it would be 1.4 billion. Now, the thing is, in the private market, multiples are a lot lower than in the public market. So you probably wouldn't see a 10x multiple for something like this. Maybe you potentially could, but I would say closer to 5 probably. So I'd say it's probably around 711-ish million right now if it was to sell on it to a private investor. So the next question is, knowing that and knowing how much money or how much percentage of the firm Cathie Wood owns, how much is Cathie Wood worth? That's what's her net worth, right? And we're not just trying to figure out like how much money Cathie Wood has in investments or how much she has in cash sitting in her bank account. You can't really figure that out without looking at the stuff, but the majority and the bulk of her net worth is in the shares she owns in her company, and so that's what we're doing. So we're figuring out how much the company's worth, how much she owns of it, and then we're working back. So Cathie Wood, if it's a 5x multiple, Cathie Wood owning 50% of the firm, she would be worth $355 billion. If she owns 75% of the firm, she'd be worth $533 million. So if we put a 10x multiple on it with a 50% ownership, then we're looking at a $711 million net worth for Cathie, and then 75% ownership would be $1 billion. So that's what we got here. I think going forward, as Ark Invest potentially makes more and more money, attracts more and more funds, assets under management get larger and larger, as long as the track record holds, Cathie Wood probably will eventually be a billionaire for sure. And then just the money that she's making off of these funds, eventually she's investing it. She'll eventually probably over time become a billionaire anyway. So that is all we have for today. I thought this was a very interesting video, very different, a different way of thinking for some people. And I always like thinking about like entrepreneurship, how much people make, ways to potentially make money one day. So I think I figured it out. I'm gonna start an ETF. No, I'm gonna start a hedge fund because they make more money. I'm gonna start a hedge fund. Who wants to invest in my hedge fund? I'm joking. I'm not starting a hedge fund. You probably don't want to invest in my hedge fund. So anyway, thanks everyone so much for watching. Please hit that like button, subscribe if you want to see future content that's kind of like this. And if you like this, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll do some more videos that are kind of like this. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video when you click it on the end screen right now.